go with the right on Kate Chata Elena and Chata Catherine Connolly.
He she thought me filu an hour na 100 morticus agus lanny. Agus thought me a gimpy earth. Ag an puintse seo, cíl ceania a bheith agat, agus an rud ceart a dhéanamh, agus an scéim luchtach seo a haring siar, agus an rud ceart a dhéanamh. Minister, Taoiseach, I wear today a jacket that's ill-fitting on me, but I wear it out of respect to a woman who spent time in a mother and baby home. And I wear it because to be in touch with her spirit, who was allergic to the double-speak and the hypocrisy that this government and previous governments persist with. And perhaps the fact that it's ill-fitting stands as a metaphor for the ill-fitting scheme that you're bringing in, but telling us it's based on human rights, when it is completely and utterly the opposite. 20 years ago, in 2003, the redress scheme came in. And that was judged as inefficient, long-winded, inadequate, and wrong that people had to waive their rights. I also participated in that scheme, and it was an offence and remains an offence to tell any of ye the amount of money that the person I represented got. That was 2003. We were supposed to learn from that. Fast forward 10 years later, 2013, the Magdalene laundering. Did we learn? Did the High Court beg us to learn? To plan out the next scheme in a fair, just way? Did we what? And so here we are today, later this evening, pushing through legislation that's discriminatory, divisive, and utterly based on cost containment measures. The apology given by the state recognised the state failed you, the mothers and the children in these homes. What should follow from that is a universal scheme following on the Oak consultation. You stand here and this week and tell us that it's not monetary and there are other ways of making up. You tell us that you're going further than the Commission of Investigation, further than the Interdepartmental Committee. All of that is disingenuous. The report from the Commission is utterly flawed. The commissioners refused to come before a committee while one of them thought it proper to attend an Oxford seminar. Various survivors were obliged to go to court, so that now 64 paragraphs of the report are acknowledged as being inaccurate. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to, you quote these. You quote the Interdepartmental Group report. They gave a number of options, and one of them was to include everyone. And then we have the examiner writing under the Freedom of Information to elicit information as to how this 6 months, this arbitrary, cruel, unacceptable cut-off point was arrived at. And you know the answer we got? The assistant principal in the department said, in my view, that this is not the appropriate time, while the deliberative process is very much ongoing. I would have thought this is the very time where we need information from you as to how you reached this arbitrary cut-off point, how you ignored those who were boarded out, how you ignored those that suffered and suffered because of their mixed race. At the very least, we deserve honesty at this point, 20 years after the first redress board.
Deputy, I don't accept your characterisation of what this government and previous governments have done. It's this government and the one before it that decided to deal with this issue, an issue that has been a scar in our society for many, many decades and many generations. And sadly, institutions such as these existed in other jurisdictions too, north of the border, for example, in other parts of Europe and the world. And we're one of the few countries, to my knowledge, that has actually faced up to this past and has tried at least to do something to put things right and put right some of the wrongs of the past. And I don't think it's solely a matter of money, and there's lots that's being done that goes well beyond financial redress. But the cost we estimate to the taxpayer will be €800 million, €800 million that could otherwise be spent meeting the needs of today or trying to build a better future. But we've decided that because of the wrongs that were done in the past, this is an appropriate amount of money to spend trying to put right the wrongs of the past, at least in some way. And if we were only interested in cost containment, Deputy, we would have just left these matters to the courts. And that's something we didn't want to do. We wanted to say that we'd put a redress scheme in place. We wouldn't require that anyone would have to go to court, that anyone would have to prove their case. We thought that would be cruel. And that's why we decided to have a non-adversarial scheme of this nature, notwithstanding the cost.
Miss, you were forced every step of the way to do something. Catherine Corliss back in 2012, who has fought gallantly. Survivors who have come here repeatedly, who have educated us. We've got over 1,500 emails at a conservative estimate in relation to the madness of progressing with this divisive discriminatory scheme. How dare you take pride in what you have done when you have been forced every step of the way? A more humble Taoiseach might learn, as you have been implored by the High Court and by various international and national bodies, including the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, to learn and to base any redress on fairness and human rights. You are not doing that. At the very least today, tell us, what was the justification for the 6 months if it wasn't money? Please, at the very least, tell us that part. And stop boasting that this is the best scheme. We have brought in schemes for Micah and all of the others, and we haven't batted an eyelid. And indeed, I've joined with my colleagues in those debates. This is an acknowledgement that we had a century, an architecture of containment from start to finish, from which various classes in this society benefited. And those people that ended up in mother and baby homes, how dare you, or the Commission, or quote the Commission, of saying they walked in there or the families put them in there. That is complete nonsense and an utter ignoring of what happened in terms of the powerful and the powerless.
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. I appreciate that you feel very strongly about this, and I appreciate that you feel passionately about this, and I appreciate that this is an issue of genuine interest and concern to you. But I don't think it's right for you to put words in my mouth. I didn't quote the Commission investigation at all. I didn't even mention the interdepartmental group, and yet you've tried to put words in my mouth. And then you moved on from that to try to criticise my character, attack me personally, and misrepresent the government. You know, I think when it comes to politics, it's in all of our interests that we don't engage in that sort of personalised criticism of each other, where we question people's character and motivations. I don't think that serves anyone's interests, quite frankly, and I don't think it's the way politics should operate. The reason why we took the decision that we did in the last government and this government was because we listened to people like Catherine Corliss, because we engaged in engaging with the survivors, because Minister Zappone, who was a minister in that government, went down to Tuam, looked in the tank, looked in the graves, and came back to the government and reported to us and said to us that we need to be the government that tried to do something about this. And that's what happened, Deputy. And I remember her that day in that cabinet meeting, addressing that cabinet meeting, almost breaking down in tears as she read out a poem that she wrote herself on that day. And it was that convinced the government to act. And I don't think it's right for you to try and demonise us in the way you're trying to do now. It's not right.